My sisters and brothers, I greet you all with the love and peace of the Lord. I invite you to meditate together with me on the holy word of God of 25th Sunday, 20 September 2020. The focus of our reflection: as true followers of Christ, we are called to put on a new mindset, and that is God's own mindset in contrast to the mindset of the world. What a difference between God and man! God Himself declares this in the clearest terms in the first reading through the prophet Isaiah. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, my ways are not your ways, says Yahweh. For as the heavens are above the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts above your thoughts. Isaiah 55, 8 and 9 verses. The parable of the workers in the vineyard in Matthew 21 to 16 clearly illustrates this contrast between the divine mindset and the worldly mindset. God's mindset is reflected in the mindset of the owner. He pays all his workers in his vineyard equally with a denarius each, irrespective of the differences in their arrival time and the duration of their work. Some early in the morning, some at 9, some at midday, some at 3 in the noon, and some others at the last hour. Obviously, it would be blamed as unreasonable act of injustice, because how can those who worked so long and hard through the day and those who hardly worked toward the end be put on the same plane and be treated equally? This is the typical ordinary human mentality represented by the early workers. They begin to grumble against the landowner. They said, "These last hardly worked an hour, yet you have treated them the same as us, who have endured the day's burden and heat." In fact, this will be the perspective and the way of thinking and arguing of most of us. And this looks perfectly reasonable and valid. But in truth, this is only selfishness in disguise and a shallow justice, because they are bothered only about their right and gain, and not the need and the good of others. Often, fight for self-interest and individual gains gets tagged and promoted as justice issues. One fails to be sensitive to sense and serve the needs of others. Absolutely, the landowner has not been unjust to anybody. And that is why we hear, "Friend, I have not been unjust to you. Did we not agree on a denarius a day? So take what is yours and go." His generosity is his freedom. And that is why he declares, "I want to give to the last as I give to you? Don't I have the right to do as I please with my money? The problem is not the generosity of the landowner, but the jealousy of the early workers. And that is why the master questions, why are you envious when I am kind? Why are you jealous when I am generous? This is the typical human mentality. Human jealousy often puts brakes on the duty of charity and also on God's own generosity. Often, the generosity shown to others and their subsequent well being and progress is very much resented. It is not because some injustice is done to us or we are deprived of our due. It is only because of a self oriented growth and happiness which cannot rejoice over the good of others. Plainly speaking, what injustice is done to the earlier workers in the gospel when the owner gives equally to the last ones as well? The landowner certainly was not unconcerned of the hard work of the earlier workers. He was certainly just towards them, but he was also concerned about the need of the last workers. His calculation is not in terms of an ordinary proportion between one's work and the payment. Rather, his calculation was in terms of divine proportion between need and payment. God thinks of the need and not the merit of the person. His mercy and generosity go beyond what man deserves. And this is the free and abundant benevolence of God, which cannot be conditioned by any human factors. And no one can claim grace and salvation on the merit of his own efforts and capacities. Mind, grace is not a personal acquisition, but it is God's gift. In the light of the parable, a disciple is then called to put on the mind of God and grow more in the spirit of humility, surrender, fraternal sensitivity, and generosity. And now, the direction and the directive for our life. Jealousy is destructive, both of the self and of others, while generosity is constructive. The more we think of our duties and not rights, the more we feel concerned about what others need rather than what is our due. There is true justice and charity. And that is the new mindset, the mindset of God Himself. Let us then strive with God's grace to put on that kind of divine mindset.